What topics do you allow in your games? Do you have a list of topics that you forbid players from discussing in your games? In this video, I'll discuss the pros and cons of topics in your game. Huxley wrote A Brave New World. Orwell wrote Animal Farm. Those are two examples in literature where people introduce topics through fantasy and science fiction. The question that I was asked by someone was, what topics do I allow in my games? And my reply is there's hardly any topic that I wouldn't allow. I mean, my World of Tiglath campaign, one of the underlying interesting challenges was licensure, or what we're seeing a lot of today, where you have to have licenses. The party came into a small village and they were seeing a conflict between a street merchant and a shopkeeper. And the city had just been occupied by the Marazar, and the Marazar are very brutal, very cruel army that has taken over. They don't put up with anything. They, their standard reply, if in doubt, kill them. Just a simple solution. So what happens is that the shopkeeper is upset. The Marazar have come in, and he's selling vegetables out of his shop, and this street peddler has come up and he's got vegetables, and the shopkeeper is arguing to the Marazar that the guy didn't have a license to sell those they didn't have a license to sell those vegetables, and they probably came from a farmer who didn't have a license to grow those vegetables. And the Marazar just go, huh? We don't understand. And they try and understand, because this concept of licensing the things is just outside their realm of understanding. So they just say the shopkeeper is wrong. He's causing a disruption, so they just kill him. So I introduced the concept of licensure in the game in an interesting way. So first off, it teaches about one of the challenges in the game is the Marazar, and one of the questions that the ethical questions that's actually been raised by the party, they start to understand what I'm trying to do. Is they go, do we want this invasive government that requires me to get licenses for just about everything? If I want to buy a farm, I got to get a license. If I want to plant vegetables, I got to get a license. I got to get to harvest each vegetable type. I have to get a different license. To sell them, I need to get a license. And what happens is, all along the way, I'm paying graft to the officials. So what happens is, in the country was rife with graft. There was a tremendous amount of smuggling, not because they needed to smuggle things per se, but it was just simply the paperwork of buying and selling was so onerous. So what happens is people tended to smuggle and do various things like that, which then an invading army came in and goes, no, we don't even buy, it's beneath the concern of the government. We're concerned with control and things like that, it's interesting argument for limited government versus, anyway. But that's one of the things that I've introduced into the game as a discussion, because it was one way to talk about it. The other one that happened was that one of the party members comes into this town. They've seen the shopkeeper killed because he raised a ruckus, and they don't like what's going on. So one of the characters, a young tiefling, comes up and she hits, or basically attacks, one of the soldiers. Well, the soldiers subdue her, and the penalty for her is death. Well, what happens is that the guy she hit says to the officer, "I ain't ever had no tiefling." And so they said, "Well, you want her before we execute her?" And so he proceeds to rape the character and mutilate the character by cutting her tail off and things like that. So we had rape. I've had recently in one of the adventures, basically the scene from Deliverance. The guy one of the male characters gets up there and gets actually gang raped, and so rape has been a topic in my adventures. I've had the party walk into a village. They arrive. It's a port. They sail into the port, and what happens is that there's a lot of corruption, and the port authorities are going to basically shake down anybody that's there, and the party doesn't want to get shook down. So what happens is that as they're walking along, this young boy is comes who is naked and covered with his genitals covered with blood, comes running out from behind a building and says, "He's the one who did it," and points at one of the characters. So we get this whole interesting subtext of child molesting going on there, and what would you do if you were accused of child molesting? Anyway, and the party, it's an interesting challenge to the party. What do you do? I brought up the topic of abortion in an odd way. One of my characters comes in and he's talking to a priest, and what happens, an offshoot of the sect that he follows, and he says, "We need you to acquire certain components for a ritual we're going to perform." And he goes, "Okay, sure, not a problem. Need to get this and need to get that." And then it comes down to, he says, "Yes, and I need the head of an unborn baby." And the character goes, "What?" "The head of an unborn baby." He goes, "Well, how do I do that?" And he says, "Well, you go find a pregnant woman and extract the head for me." Sort of matter-of-factly, and the character then kills the priest, and it causes a whole other commotion. But what happens is that you can introduce interesting topics into the conversation and see how your players react. Because, you're going to introduce your moral judgments, what you think about things like this, simply because they're controversial topics. I mean, to me, one of the most controversial topics is the topic of religion in the game, and you create your gods and various things, and it's most fantasy settings are have a pantheon of gods and what happens. And I know for my worlds I've created, I wrote a theogony. I don't know if anybody's read Hesiod's Theogony, which describes how the gods came about, but I've done that for the gods in my world, and that is an interesting exercise. But there's interesting religious subtexts about that. Do you believe in God? Are you an atheist or whatever? And how do your characters play about that? So all of those topics get introduced into gaming, and we just wash over them and let them go. But I tend to encourage putting these interesting topics into it because it makes the game definitely more memorable. These are very memorable scenarios where a character gets raped, where a character gets accused of rape, gets accused of child molesting, gets, various things like that. You can make up interesting scenarios that challenge your characters in ways that are just not, "Oh, I gotta go kill the monster. I gotta go kill the monster." Though, to me, those are sort of boring. Creating yet another dungeon with yet another set of monsters and maybe a treasure and a magic item and a trap or two, and I go, that's boring after a while. Yes, it can be, you can have some interesting things, but I want to introduce to the characters challenges that make them think, make them react. And that's why I like to introduce topics. So for me, there are very few topics that I can think of that some people get squeamish. I mean, anybody who's read Game of Thrones, there's the discussion of incest, and there's discussion of that, and then the whole topic of food. Food is a fun topic because, yeah, you can find something that'll make somebody squeamish about some way. Oh, they're offering you bugs, they're offering you balut, they're offering you a variety of different things to eat, which maybe you get a bit squeamish about, and it's people get upset. I mean, cheese. Some people find the smell of cheese disgusting. Some people enjoy the various cheeses. I mean, have you smelled Limburger? Have you tasted Limburger? Have you tasted all these various different kinds of cheese that are out there? And what was it, the smelly foot cheese is the way some people described it, that is there, and you can have all those fun things that in your adventure. But that's not real, those aren't really controversial, but there's fun ways to make your party squirm about what they're being offered. Maybe they're some of the classic scenes in what is it, the second Indiana Jones film, where you're offered all these variety of different foods, and brains and various things like that. And it's challenging to make it, adds a challenge to the characters rather than just, oh, we got to go kill another monster, we got to go do that. If that's what you want, great. I like a game that makes both the dungeon master and the player think, that make them consider what their character would believe, how it would react, and how it affects them. Personally, I mean, you have your beliefs about, everybody's got some belief about abortion. Somebody has some belief about child molesters and things like that, pedophilia, rape. You can bring all those topics in and introduce them and make the game much more interesting. Now, the downside to this is you really need to have adults. And I remember one scenario, I was gaming, it was at Google Hangouts, and I'd actually prepared the scenario. And I thought the party would go off in one direction, and it was going to have some very adult topics. And what I'd actually done is I'd found some interesting artwork. I'd found some statues and some paintings that actually exist out there. You can Google and find them on the web, and that they were going to run into them. Some of them that were magical, but they're, shall we say, very sexually explicit. And I suddenly realize I've got a young girl who's coming in with her father, and I go, oops, I have to redirect the adventure. And I had to stop and change it in the middle of an adventure, which was, shall we say, a bit disconcerting and uncomfortable for me for a little bit there, because I want to know what the age of my audience is, and I prefer to have adults. I mean, I'm not going to prohibit some things. I tend to quote soft pedal things that I don't do the deep discussions with that when I have younger people playing. And I've had some young people like 12 and 13 in the games, but I tend to prefer dealing with adults simply because I like to deal with adult subjects. I'm running one adventure right now which is very adult. That's the one that I'm sort of restrict the hangouts to the 18 plus, so we can talk about sex and we can talk about adult topics. And that one discusses the sex slave trade. What happens is the characters were all kidnapped and forced into the sex slave trade, and they're trying to overthrow the evil lich who established the sex slave trade as a mechanism to continually fill her phylactery. So there's a reason behind it and how things go on. But you can put all of this adult topics into your game You can talk about economy. You can talk about various politics. Are you conservative? Are you liberal? Are you progressive? Are you libertarian? Whatever, you can put those in there as different situations. You can put in abortion, animal rights if you want to get into that. Do you allow, treatment of animals? What does the party do if they come up and they find someone beating their horse terribly? Do you allow that? What's their standard? You can introduce all these topics into the game in a way that makes the game much more memorable. And it's as you find out about how people feel, you find out a little bit about how they believe it. But the interesting thing is, it makes it a lot more fun, because you challenge characters with things that move them outside their comfort zone. I mean, I would be very uncomfortable if somebody accused me of child molesting. I would, because I know it would be untrue. But what happens is, if somebody accused me of that, and it's untrue, but just being accused of that, or if you're accused of rape, or if you're accused of beating your wife, the classic question, are you still beating your wife? What happens if you walk into town and a woman says, that's my deadbeat husband, he owes me all this support? Interesting discussion there. Brings up the characters of all that. How does the party react to being accused? It brings in graft and corruption and all those challenging things, rather than just going killing monsters. Like I said, if you just want to go and kill monsters and have those kind of adventures, great. That's not the kind of adventures I run. If you like my video, press the thumbs up button. I'd appreciate that. Or if this interests you, you can always subscribe to my channel. There's a button right above. I look forward to hearing some comments. Tell me what you think about this, and I'll try and reply, and we can see if I'll do some more of these. Thank you.